Mortal Empires has the widest range of factions to potentially be friends with, but more likely go to war with. In that range you have all kinds of armies, mechanics and behaviours, but which of these are the most annoying to go up against? Today we're counting down the top 10 most annoying factions to fight in Total War Warhammer 3. Coming in 10th place we have the Wood Elves. Now I know this might seem like a strange one, but the Wood Elves can really be a terror, especially if you don't have the right army to fight them. It's mainly a battle problem with their overwhelming skirmishing ranged firepower. It causes them to pick you apart more often than not from a hidden location in some trees. Add on the reasonable front lines and monsters, and you have a faction that you don't want to meet in the battlefield without the exact right composition to counter them. On the campaign side of things, they are basically impossible to attack, especially those in Athel Loren. The constant attrition, reduced movement range, and the fact there are just so many of them in such a small location, and more often than not they're all working together, it just makes getting in there to take them out nigh on impossible without a series of the most elite armies you can field, and a bit of good luck. The saving grace is that they mostly keep to themselves, so if you get a little bit of distance between you and the magical forests, you should be fine. But if you find yourself wandering the forests of the world and can hear some whispering in Than El Farin, it's not the Vietnamese, but it might be the trees, and a hail of arrows are absolutely headed your way. Coming in 9th place we have the Dwarves. I get the feeling that this might surprise some people being on this list, but I think they belong here for a range of reasons, but it all comes back to one thing: turtles. The Dwarves are the turtling experts in the game. Once they plant their feet, it is almost impossible to shift them without some serious effort on your part. First of all, they have crazily high armor right from the get-go, with their starting warriors having more armor than some factions' endgame front lines. Early in the game, when you have no armor-piercing damage, taking out anything in their ranks is going to be a Herculean task, and even later on, it doesn't get much easier. As you get more damage, they just get thicker and thicker armor. Their leadership is also exceptional. Of course you have slayers who will fight to the death, but even their basic warriors have excellent leadership and will be on a shockingly small amount of troops remaining and still stand and fight. Now this is all well and good, but their front line's damage isn't out of this world. But don't worry, they have insane ranged firepower to make up for this. Early on it's basic archers and catapults, but that's still enough to put your army in ICU in a few barrages if you're not careful. Later on, however, they have flamethrowers, explosives, extreme ranged artillery, and even literal bombers. If you're forced to make the approach against the dwarves, you're going to be picked apart before you can even get close to the wall of steel that is their front line. The one thing making them so low on the list of a roster like this is their playstyle. Turtling is most effective when defending, since you can wait for enemies to come to you. When they're attacking, however, they have to advance, leaving plenty of room for faster factions to get in and take out their ranged firepower, leaving just the block of immovable steel to get rid of. Their little legs make them slow, meaning flanks are much easier to pull off, so they do have counters. You just really need to play to them to take them out. Add on the fact their campaign mechanics aren't really all that painful to fight against, and they're annoying but not impossible to play against. Coming in 8th place we have NURGLE. Now I know Kugath has been a little bit wacky since making it to Immortal Empires, but NURGLE is still one of the most annoying Chaos factions to go up against. And yeah, I'm going to lump in Festus since he's more or less doing the same stuff, because he should have been a Monogod faction, but I digress. And also kind of Skrulk, but not entirely. Anyway, the main problem with fighting NURGLE is how very on-brand the faction is. They're not going to wipe you off the map in seconds, and honestly, they may not even be all that aggressive in taking you out if they do even get that close. But what they do is slow your game right down to a crawl to bring you to their level. They constantly spam plagues of all kinds with various effects, from stopping replenishments, unit debuffs. There's not a lot of counterplay to this, and you just kind of have to live with the fact that you're going to be at some sort of disadvantage when taking the fight to the Plague Lord. In battle, the fun continues, with poison damage absolutely everywhere, again bringing you down to their level by reducing your unit stats and taking good units right back to being terrible. Like on the campaign map, you might beat them, but they'll slow everything down to a crawl until you do. NURGLE and his associates is making it onto this list for the pure reason that they are annoying to fight. Maybe not hard or even threatening, but they are 100% annoying. Plagues, poison, pestilence, and pissing me off all wrapped into a stinky green package. Add on the extended roster with the Champions of Chaos DLC, and unlike Isabella's chest, they're never fun to find yourself up against. Next up we have the Warriors of Chaos. I think the Warriors will be pretty proud to find themselves on this list after years of trials and tribulations as one of the worst factions in the game. Now the entire playstyle of the Warriors of Chaos is annoying to play against, since their entire purpose is to burn everything they can see to the ground. All they want to do is raise the world to the ground, and they easily have the tools to do it, no matter which faction you find yourself up against. With the addition of their dark fortresses, you have even more to worry about, as they can now create strongholds to defend as well as raising everything else in sight. Honestly, the thing about the Warriors of Chaos which makes them so hard to fight is the variety they can field in battle. With the recent DLC, their roster is truly massive, with powerful units in almost every category. You really just can't plan for fighting them, since you really don't know what you're going to be up against. They could come at you with poison damage, overwhelming magical power, monsters and demons of all shapes and sizes. Hell, they even have some ranged options these days, so nowhere is safe. Add on the variety of mechanics you can be up against, like plagues, bloodlettings, seduction, and even the basic vassal spam, and you have a faction that seems overwhelming to fight against at the best of times. Coming in 6th place we have the Vampire Counts / Coast. I'm going to lump these two undead factions together since fighting them is annoying for the same reasons. Mainly, It's the raised dead in its many forms. You can beat them in battle and push them back, wiping out most of their armor, and yet post-battle some will come back from the dead literally via magic, meaning you have to kill some of them twice to make sure they're done with. It's great when playing as them, having your army survive when it really shouldn't, allowing you to slink away into the darkness to lick your wounds. When playing against them, it just slows down your game and tires your troops out even further by taking out the exact same units that they just took out seconds ago. Then you have them actively raising the dead to create powerful armies in a single turn, meaning the undefended settlement is now full geared to the tits with a selection of undead defenders. A greenskin war takes turns to fill up. A vampire army can raise the dead enough times to fill several armies all in one turn, and there's not really a single thing you can do to stop it. Now the rosters of both of these factions aren't incredibly difficult to take out and are relatively easy to counter. Don't get me wrong, they can be a challenge to face in combat, but if you have lots of ranged and or fire, then they go down pretty damn fast. Still, a full army of anything appearing out of nowhere is never fun to fight, so they're here on the list all the same. Breaking into the top 5, we have KHORNE. I think it'd be wrong if KHORNE wasn't somewhere on this list. The literal faction of battling and bloodshed needs to be hard to fight, and they're up there as being a pretty damn hard opponent. There's nothing complicated about them, which makes them annoying to go up against. It's really just that they're good at fighting and doing it basically all the time. They're incredibly aggressive, so will fight you for basically any reason they can think of, including just because they wanna. And of course, like any good hyper-aggressive faction, they're not just going to take your settlements. It's going to be sacking and raising and erasing any and all progress you've made in your provinces and literally sending them back down to bedrock. Add on the fact KHORNE specifically can automatically colonize raised settlements, and you've got a recipe for a faction that you really don't want to fight. In the battle side of things, they're pretty devastating in melee but lack much ranged, which means that they can be turtled against relatively easily as long as you protect your flanks. Make no mistake however, they'll absolutely take some of your army down with them with their insane damage over everything playstyle. Nothing more to it than that. They're out and out aggressive, and if that aggression is turned on you and they max out bloodletting, you're going to be in a world of trouble. Coming in 4th place, we have the BEASTMEN. Honestly, the BEASTMEN are more or less the same as KHORNE in terms of why they're annoying, but they somehow turn it up a little bit. First of all, more legendary lords, so there's a lot more threatening factions all over the map. Their campaign strat of erecting herdstones and raising all settlements around them is also a lot harder to counter if you ask me. First of all, they occupy no settlements, so getting them back means everything is raised, so no progress ever gets saved. The herdstones are also next to impossible to take out, especially if they have an army defending them, so can grind your game to a halt. They can ambush super easily, so I hate that, and generally it feels like they run through my empire a lot more often with a lot less difficulty than KHORNE. In battle is a similar story to KHORNE, but with a much more mature roster. Their melee lineup is crazy, especially on the monster side of things. You'll struggle to find any faction that can stand up to the sheer mass and momentum of the Beastmen once they get on a roll. They also have a select few ranged options, so have that very small edge on KHORNE. Add on to this their magical options, and they're a scary faction to even think about fighting. I reckon give it a couple of years for a few more DLCs and KHORNE might get the win, but as it stands, I feel like the beasts are everywhere and impossible to stop once they get going. Coming in 3rd place, we have the Empire. Now I know the days of Empire dominance are a little bit in the past, but damn it, they're still one of my least favourite factions to find myself up against. Now to clarify, it's mainly Cal/Battle that are the problem. Whoever takes control of the other first will end up slowly confederating the rest of the Empire, and it always seems to happen at the most convenient times for them. Say you've got Cal down to just Altdorf and his army, and you're closing in about to finish him off when suddenly he confederates Toddy, or Talabecland, or Aveland, or one of the other seemingly 50 Empire factions nearby. Out of nowhere, he gets all this new land and these new armies, meaning you're basically back to square one as far as wiping him out is concerned. It may not be tough lands or armies, but it doesn't matter. It keeps him in the game and he somehow always comes back with an inordinately powerful army for you to take down. In battle, all Empire factions can be pretty hellish, and it's really down to their firepower. The infantry is alright, pretty strong but nothing wacky. The artillery, however, is full on stupid. Hellstorm spam is somehow something the AI knows how to do, and it will be abused to blow you up from the entire map away, and unless you're fast, sneaky, or both, you can't do a whole lot to counter it. If I see an Empire army with artillery, I do everything in my power to avoid a manual battle, because it's going to be 5 minutes of watching my army get blown to bits, followed by crying, reloading null save, and running away at Mach 25. Like I said, they're not as strong as they once were, but they're still one of the more frustrating options when looking for an opponent. In 2nd place, we have the Greenskins, and if you think I'm not going to include my boys in green on this list, then you're really just lying to yourself. Of course they belong here, and it's not just because they're one of the most aggressive factions in the game. It's mainly down to 2 reasons, and both are linked to their campaign mechanics, just giving them free power spikes. First up, tribal confederations. All they need to do is beat another greenskin in battle and they get all of their land, just like that. Meaning they can quickly go from a single province faction to one that spans half the map. The second reason is the wars. I'm sure I don't need to tell you how straight up busted it is to have a full stack of greenskin troops, especially late game ones, all of a sudden spawn an entire second army out of their ass crack. I know that with the new reinforcement changes, it's not quite as strong as it once was, but still, its 2 entire greenskin armies and their roster isn't exactly small or weak. You've got no chance of taking out the first army before the second arrives, so you're guaranteed to be fighting both at once, chances out without a backup army of your own, meaning your chances of a dub are sub-zero. Speaking of the greenskin roster, like I said, it's huge and has strong units in basically every category, but their main draw is melee momentum. One army charging full speed at you and pushing through the Force for Phasm Factorio trains is bad enough. Add on another, and it's over. And coming in first place, is it really a surprise to anyone? Of course, it's the SKAVEN. They top yet another list. Of all the wins, this one is the one that they deserve the most. Let's just rattle off a few of the tools at their disposal that make them just so much fun to play against. We've got ambushing on the campaign map, which is basically uncounterable and a stupid advantage right out of the gate. Their roster is massive and chock full of crazy powerful units of all kinds. We're talking ranged infantry to rip anything and everything to shreds in seconds, huge monsters to tear apart infantry and large targets with ease, war machines to run through just about anything you put in front of them, sorta decent front lines eventually, they even have sneaky rats that you can't see until they're biting your toes. Speaking of Bal, the menace below makes any formation you have pointless and can spawn units out of nowhere with no counter, great laws of magic with spammable spells, looking at you Warp Lightning, ambush again, but in blue, and finally they spread corruption all over the map, making them a pain to invade and painful to clear out should they invade you. There's nothing about them that isn't annoying if you ask me, and every time I know I have to fight them, I'm just itching on that Alt F4 trigger, so I can stop playing and open up an actual good CA game, Viking Battle for Asgard. That's my list. Did I miss something you think should have made it? Let me know down in the comments. Like, subscribe, and if you want to know what the hardest campaigns are in all of Immortal Empires, then check out this video here to see the top 10.